So I'm covering privacy in chapter 5. I'm talking about it legally and ethically, and then I'm also going to introduce the kind of circles of intimacy that is introduced kind of in the chapter. But to start off, the book talks about privacy legally. It says that that privacy is manifested in 4 ways. It says, number 1, intrusion upon a person's seclusion or solitude, such as invading one's home or personal papers to get a story. 2, public disclosure of embarrassing private facts, such as revealing someone's notorious past when it has no bearings on that person's present status. Publicity that places a person in false light, such as enhancing a subject's biography to sell additional books. Misappropriation of a person's name or likeness for personal advantage, such as using Hollywood's megastar Julia Roberts' image to sell a product without her permission. So those are the 4 distinctions of privacy, and then the section continues to go on in saying that, privacy is something that was introduced, but as society continues, it's becoming harder and harder to legally distinguish what privacy looks like, especially when it comes to celebrities and what we see in the media today. There's a lot less privacy present in all of that. So it discusses just like public figures and what it looks like today, because now we may see who's dating who or what's going on with what, and way back when that was considered extremely private and definitely a line that was crossed. So it discusses that legally and says that it's just harder to distinguish as time goes on, and introduces the need for ethical privacy and the importance of that. So then that takes us into the next section, in which it does talk about ethical privacy. It introduces communitarian thinking, which links privacy to the community, and it says a credible ethics or privacy needs to be rooted in the common good rather than individual rights. It also introduces this section where it says, when the self is understood expansively so as to include not merely undifferentiated moral agency, but also the person's particular endowments and attributes, and not merely those particular endowments and attributes either, but also specific things needed for contextual aspects of personhood, then this understanding is the thick theory of self, which is from Radin, which embodies community in the self, but also self in the community. So it gets very complicated, and essentially it wraps up into, individuals have to learn when to share or withhold information, and the community has a responsibility to learn when to look away and when that information is not theirs for the taking. And it goes on to explain this a little bit better in the circles of intimacy that are introduced. So if you look at the circle of intimacy, which is on page 143, it just discusses kind of how the individual would share information and how those things would work. So it starts in the first circle is you and just casual acquaintances, and the information would not be as personal. And then as it continues circle to circle, it gets more personal, and you're sharing closer and deeper information with the individuals as it gets to the middle. So it starts with acquaintances, then it's you and close friends, you and your significant other, husband, wife, and then just the information you keep to yourself. And it says that the conflict that arises is when the circles kind of get mixed together. And it gives the example of a rape victim who unwillingly sees her name in print or in the news or something, and that is something that would be more in one of the closest circles, whether it's close friends or you and a significant other, just something that you keep to yourself, when it's put and exposed in a different circle in which that information wasn't really found appropriate, that's when we get to that harm. So then we go back to the ethical section of the book, and it also talks about potential harms of kind of violating the privacy. So it says there is informational harm such as identity theft, informational inequality such as governments and corporates amassing large amounts of data about individuals without their knowledge or consent, informational injustice, for example, transferring data from your financial records to the local newspaper without appropriate contextual information, and an encroachment on the moral autonomy, the capacity to shape our own moral biographies to reflect our own moral careers, to evaluate and identify with our own moral choices without critical gaze or interference of others. So when it comes to privacy, it's something that is very complicated, and it's more looked at on an ethical standard, as legally it gets kind of complicated as time goes on. And it's been seen where journalists aren't willing to cross their own moral and ethical boundaries, and it's just begs the question on, what is privacy, and how can we evaluate it, and where is the line? So that's where the circle of intimacy really come in and really are useful in this chapter.